Islamic countries without looking over your shoulder. So Steve has a point. Where you're born and the values that you receive play a big role in your social development.
Yeah, and there's two other major factors, contributing factors. One, Islam is a state religion over there. I mean, so if you do not adhere to the tenets properly, you can go to jail. You can get fined. You can lose body parts. You are heavily influenced by the fact that you can't have the freedoms you expect to have over here. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, over here, like you said, it's more of a cultural Christianity of sorts, right? Over there, it's a way of life. It's not just a religion to them. It is a way of life. And you don't see that here as much, except, as you noted, in what we would call a cult, right? So the norm for them is cult for us. So we are, as Americans, and I would even say European as well, we're a lot more mainstream when it comes to the average religious person, because religiosity is nothing compared to what you see over the Arab Emirates and Bahrain, Dubai, Jabal Ali. I've been over there as well. Two different worlds, absolutely.
When you finally came out of religion, what was that like in terms of? Because I assume since you were in it so long and you seemed pretty dedicated to it, that it would be a safe bet that all of your, or most of your relationships would be kind of connected or intertwined into that as well. So what was that like when you finally realized, there's nothing to this, I've been living a lie? How did that go over with not only the people in your family, but your circle of friends, that sort of thing?
Well, first of all, it's somewhat like what you might imagine. It's like getting unplugged from the Matrix. You're completely disoriented. And you are scrambling and searching for something to hold on to so that you don't continue to fall down this rabbit hole of the great unknown. You're right, Kyle, in saying that most of my connections were religious connections. That was my family. That was my social support system and structure. That's all my memories. That's where I started my professions. Everything is tied to that. So I felt, or rather, what felt like an organic process of deepening my faith in studying theology and posing questions, the hard questions that usually don't ever come up, it simply led to a place where I realized I was walking to an edge, or maybe a building top, where you're looking over the edge and you're thinking, what do I do now? Jump? That's crazy.
Right.
And then you realize you have no alternative. And then you do, simply because it seems like there's more answers that direction than what's behind you. And by the way, everybody looks like they're faking it once you progress to that point anyways. You look back and you realize all the masks that everybody wears when they're acting pious, or when they say, I don't want sex. I want to remain pure. No, that's a straight up lie. We all want this. We all want food. We all want shelter. We all want sex. And we want these with varying degrees, but these are basic human needs. And what I began to recognize is there are institutional veils placed over us that we at some point voluntarily choose not to acknowledge. And that's not my personality. I tend to think that the taboo things are okay to talk about. After all, they're real. So I jumped off the ledge, and it was disorienting. I lost a lot of my community, no doubt. But it was also very liberating after a few days. I do still have some friends that I'm very grateful are still hanging out with me. But now I am forging my own community. That is why I created Fully Deconverted. I do have a community there. I have a solid team and people smarter than I in the discussion group that I for 20 years being in Christianity, never thought I would have these conversations. And this is where I landed. I count myself fortunate.
So what made you decide to go into the kind of activism that you do now? What was the trigger point for that?
The trigger point was as a rebuttal for the shutdown on discussion that was happening when I was a Christian asking questions. And I was good friends with a pastor of a local church here where I reside. And, I did filmmaking there. I filmed their conversion stories. So I was a prominent figure. People knew my face. I was involved there for 2 years, gave money, did their live production, and I was their resident videographer. So as I began my journey of asking hard questions, going to this social media platforms, I would get a lot of comments, a lot of people kind of, shh, don't go there. Don't ask that. You might cause a divide, right? Don't express allegiance to an ideology that is contrary to the core of ours. Because if you do so, we'll have to quietly dismiss you. And this is not okay. Not when you value the relationship over the ideology that someone may hold. By the way, we change those every 5 years on average. So once I did deconvert, I did the thing that I was not allowed to do in my former community. I went independent, started filming my own documentaries, and I gave that back to my religious community so that they could see that I wasn't afraid and that they don't have to be either. And then that evolved into fully deconverted. I did it because I was told I couldn't do it.
Good for you. That's the best motive. That's the best motivator, I think. And when
been there, done that.
Yeah.
Does a lot of your congregation ever watch any of your things? I mean, do they, watch you and ask you questions, or are they still kind of standoffish in some ways?
Some of them have departed fellowship with me. Others have blocked me. Others have come on the journey with me, though they're still a Christian. I don't know if I would say somebody has switched sides because of what I do. But I received more than what I expected in private messages of support for people that you wouldn't have expected, given where they are in the church hierarchy. So, all in all, I counted that as a huge plus, and it restored my faith or trust in the fact that people can exercise common sense despite being in an environment which really produces nothing other than like some sort of cognitive conflict, which people just resign themselves from working out. So people have watched, but nobody's came to me, Steve, and said, because of the information you brought up, I've also deconverted. We humans tend to be a little bit more, I don't want to say cowardly, because that seems maligning, but I know what it's like to feel fear and to be cowardly. I get that. I understand that. So it does take somebody weighing the options and being willing to risk, in this case, all out of fear, to be able to say that to somebody else. Hey, you know what? I no longer believe either, despite my 20, 50 years, $100,000 investment. Just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, you remind me a lot of Paul Gia, because he has a very similar experience in his deconversion.
And a lot of the people that we talk to, that's the like Ron Miscavige was saying, the biggest hindrance for people that to come out of Scientology is that very thing, that hesitant to admit they were wrong about something they invested not only so much time, but so much money in the case of Scientology, because they sink untold amount of money to that, and nobody wants to walk away looking like, oh, I just pissed that away.
Yeah, it's called. There's actually a name for that. It's actually called the sunk cost fallacy. And it's basically, you've already invested so much time, then you might as well see it through to the end kind of thing. Let's get to that OT level 7 or 8. I've already put in 200,000. What's a few more, couple tens of thousands to get to the next operating level kind of thing? That's exactly what it is.
That's right.
Well,
Steve,
we do it all the time. We do it with relationships. The sunk cost fallacy all the time. How many times have you been in a relationship? You said, I've already been with her 3 years. So let's try to work it out. When it's not going to work out, right? We've all been there.
Too many.
That.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We do that in all areas of our life, Steve. You're right.
Usually.
So what was it that? Don't tell him that, Arael. We won't. We don't have a frame big enough down there to fit his head in if you don't.
Between my ego and his looks, I don't know why we have anybody else on this show. What are we doing here?
That's quite a call. Thank you, Steve. So what was the first project that
You're
you
cute
set
for
your
a
sights
guy,
on?
I guess. I don't know.
Okay, Steve. Look, look. When you do that, leave it at the first compliment, because if you keep going with it,
What
it
is
makes
Dave
it
doing?
really like.
What is Dave doing in my image here?
Okay.
Dave, you're freaking me out here.
It's pushing it. You know what I'm saying? You just acknowledge it and then move on. If you keep pushing it, then we're where we are now, where there's just like really awkward.
What's happening?
What's he
Oh,
doing?
this is awkward. What is Dave's doing something in my head?
Oh,
Carry
nice.
on. Oh, I get it now.
We'll
I get it.
see how big it gets before the show's over. I had to pause. Steve, what? I don't know what's happening. Dave is screwing your window over big time. Good. So, what was your first project that you decided that you were going to do when you started doing Fully Deconverted? What was your goal, and then the first step you took to get to that goal? Like, what was the first thing that you decided that you wanted to cover, talk about, shoot, that sort of thing?
In terms of Fully Deconverted, the first project that we really launched with was our 10-episode series with Aaron Ra. And I didn't know anything about the atheist community. I lucked into meeting Aaron Ra. I didn't really know a lot about his content, but he seemed, I do interviews. So I asked him for an interview. He said, yeah, we did it. We filmed it. And that was before I was actually public as being a non-believer. So I was launching one of my last documentaries called Reshaping Reality. That's where I came out in the same story as I tell of another Christian minister who became an atheist. So while waiting for that to air, I filmed Aaron Ra. And I knew I needed to go somewhere with this. So after Reshaping Reality aired, I branded Fully Deconverted because I realized that's where I'm at in life. And then I produced the Aaron Ra series. And that was meant to be a project where, that was the first big project where people can see the discussion happen. If you watch this series, you can tell I'm newly deconverted because a lot of my questions might seem devil's advocate, and sure, they are. But they're also still questions of mine that I still had, or perhaps still have. And that's the platform that we started on. I'm a filmmaker by trade. So that is a slice of the pie that Fully Deconverted brings now to the atheist community. Just film, trying to make something produced, artistic, repackage our ideas and our discussions in a more artful presentation, so it can be more entertaining to watch, and it can drive home kind of a more poetic message instead of just being lecture form. And we hope to continue doing this. And we just wrapped our series with Richard Carrier, and we'll be airing that this fall.
Oh, excellent! That's exciting. I don't think you could have picked a better person to start your series with than Aaron. What were you? Were you still in the faith when that started, or were you just weren't out yet? Like you doubted and you kind of thought that this wasn't true or anything like that, or were you still struggling with it a little bit while talking to him?
I was 95, maybe 99% certain that I could not walk back to the core of Christian claims with any confidence. So I was right at that ledge. And I told Aaron that I was no longer a believer, because you can't, with any kind of integrity, say, yo, I'm a Christian believer. And sit there and, really bring up all this controversy. So at that time, looking back, I was deconverted. It was a one-way trip out. There was no going back at that point. I was still a church goer. Sure. So after filming that series, which I was marketing, people knew that I filmed a series with Aaron Ra, though I doubt many of the people that I knew personally knew the name Aaron Ra or even anything about atheist activism. And then I came back, continued to market it, produce it, aired Reshaping Reality, still went to church. And the week before Reshaping Reality aired, the pastor said some really dumb things from stage. And I just figured, here's my exit. And I did.
What were the dumb
things?
That was
like April-ish. the dumb thing was, I